You're very welcome to Radio Espial. This is episode 78. This is a full timeline. The case from 1991 of Charles Brooke Pickard. Now, his common name that he was known as was Brooke Pickard. Before we begin, thank you to all our recent subscribers. As always, you're very welcome, and indeed our new subscribers. We're pushing on now for nearly 7,000 subscribers. You're very welcome as well to join on Facebook, the Radio Espial community. Let's get straight on with it. In a short while, Brian will join us. We're going to start with this case summary, and then we're going to move to a little bit of the background on Brooke's case. On Friday the 26th of April 1991, 43-year-old Charles Brooke Pickard was abducted by a group of armed men and driven away in his van from the White Strand Beach area at Castlecove, County Kerry, Ireland, and he has not been seen since. So by 2026, next April, we will be almost on 35 years. Now, on the 16th of May in 1991, his van, a Navy Ford Transit, was found burnt out in Shona Loughnane Forest in the townland of Dara Najiha near Waterville, County Kerry. That's about 27 miles from where he was abducted, about 45 kilometres away. Over many years of the investigation, it became clear that the abduction and murder of Brooke Pickard was planned using the dupe of a man with a broken down car, and had been orchestrated by a group from Northern Ireland in communication with people residing in the south of Ireland in places like Kerry, Kilkenny, Cork and Waterford. What remains a mystery is a real motive to the murder, and on Garda Síochána and the PSNI in the police force in Northern Ireland have long excluded an operation instigated by paramilitary or provisional forces and activities as the real reason. Rather, the abduction and murder had more to do with some local grievance. Now, our case background. Charles Brooke Pickard was born in Leeds, Yorkshire in 1948. Brooke Pickard, much like the working class mining area he came from, was hard working and industrious from a young age. Outgoing and social in his 20s and 30s, he worked numerous jobs, from farm work, mechanic, construction sites, as well as a van and truck driver. Brooke, as he was like to be called, was multi-skilled, and wherever he lived, he settled quickly into the community. Always one to help out another, be it a stranger or a neighbour, religion was a cornerstone to his life and later family. And that was actually how he met his wife, Penny. The pair met in 1979, Penny needing an odd job man with a van to move some stuff from her home. They hit it off, and by 1983, still living in England, they considered where to live with a new young family of very young kids. With family connections in the west of Scotland, that was where first thoughts and exploration began, with trips to see farm properties. Despite having no family association with Ireland, Brooke soon fell in love with the idea of moving to the west or south of Ireland. It seemed perfect to set up a small farm, and the weather wouldn't be as harsh as in Scotland. By November 1983, the couple, Brooke and Penny and their growing family found the perfect home on the ring of Kerry between Waterville and Tneum. It was the dream come true. Perfect. A farmhouse needing a bit of work in Behaghane while overlooking the southwest coast of the Atlantic Sea. The farm had several acres with meadows and mature trees elevated to avoid flooding and close to the small village of Castlecove with its small church, shop and pub. And that is that image you're seeing there. Again, we'll do the outtakes for the images so you can see them more clearly and larger. That is Penny and Brooke. Now, of their move, within weeks, Brooke was already busy improving and renovating the farmhouse. A year or two later, they moved the livestock in: chickens, ducks, geese, and later Jersey cows. The dream was completed by 1991. A busy farm, work for Brooke and Penny, and 4 wonderful kids. Lisa, the eldest, at 14, James, aged 11, Crohan, aged 7, and their youngest, Dan, aged 5. Incidentally, later you will be hearing from Crohan Pickard. I'm going to bring in Brian now for his initial opening thoughts on this case. Brian, what you make of this one?
Hello, Mick. Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all your channel support there. Yeah, Mick, this is a very disturbing case.
Yeah.
No real clarity in a lot of aspects about it. And I think it's one of the many cases where circumstances led to valuable time being lost between his disappearance and the realization that he was missing. Now, that can happen at any time frame or period rather. But yeah, again, putting yourselves back into 1991, this is before mobile phones, living in a rural area, etc. So, first, that was lost, and given the nature of his work, he, his wife did say that he could be out working for long periods, and he might have come home late, and plans used to change, and they kind of expected that. So I think it was a case of she expected him when she saw him a lot of the time there, if he was on a long shift working. But anyway, that's it. Unfortunately, that was lost there, and I think very tragic for his family and friends. He was clearly a hard-working family man who contributed to his community as well, and they were talking about helping neighbours and so on as well. So very, very, very sad case, Mick. Very, very disturbing.
Yeah, and as I say, back to 1991, as we always say, and it's the last thing we'll say before we get into the timeline, Brian. Yeah. We keep emphasising this. People, please don't judge this case with your mindset as we are now 34 years later. Put your mind back in where you were in 1991, because we didn't have the communication, the associations, and the way Garda investigations might have worked.
No CCTV.
No CCTV. Well, probably
very little.
Very, very limited. Yeah. So, again, before you say, oh, why didn't they have CCTV? Or what was his mobile? Again, 1991. Yeah. Okay, Brian. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's get into
timeline there, Mick. So
yeah, we get into the timeline. Before we start this timeline, you are going to hear at various points. You're going to hear from Penny, Brooke's wife. You're also going to hear from Crohan, one of his sons. We will also have images, maps, so you understand the vicinities, distances, and directions. Before we get into the day-to-day timeline, we have to disclose all details that we think relevant when researching a case that may influence any conclusions that we later reach and that you may consider. When we do our research, we must disclose details through PNCs and legal court documents when we feel they are or may be pertinent to the case history. In December 1988, that would have been 3 years before disappearance, abduction and murder, court records show that Charles Brooke Pickard, in company with another man, were both detained and later arrested at a location in Dunleary, Dublin. Brooke's friend was in possession of a modified starting pistol, not an actual real firearm. The use of such a threat was clear. Court documents reveal that Brooke was owed £4,000, that's Irish punt at the time, from a man who himself had borrowed money from two other people to repay his debt. An imitation firearm had been brandished during an incident with the two men. They, understandably, took Brooke's car licence plate and reported him to Gardaí and the other man. Brooke and his friend were later arrested, charged, and Brooke was given a suspended sentence for the incident. Now, while concerning, there is no evidence that this specific incident played any part in the people and the events that followed 2.5 years later. However, Radio Espial has included it because the curious circumstances of loaning money, owing money, and taking circumstances into your own hands with a perceived firearm may have a relevance in what actually happened to Charles Brooke Pickard on Friday the 26th of April 1991. On Thursday the 25th of April, I'll explain this vehicle in a second, a number of eyewitnesses in the Castlecove area notice a car that they do not think local in the area of Castlecove and Sneem. It is parked awkwardly in the village of Sneem during the afternoon, and its orange colour and positioning makes them think it was perhaps broken down or abandoned. Now, incidentally, this is not a picture of that car at that specific time. This was later when it was recovered, and we'll bring this picture up probably later to point out one or two details on it. But that is an orange Toyota Corolla. Quite old. I think this car must have been, by 1991 at least, maybe 10 years old, possibly more. Now, on Friday the 26th of April 1991, this is the day of disappearance. While owning an active farm with early morning jobs to do, we do not have the exact details of when Brooke awoke and his specific movements within his home. However, with 4 school-going kids of varying ages, he and his wife Penny would have been pretty busy preparing for the day ahead. Now, we believe around the time 10:15 a.m. in the morning, once again, like the previous day, a male witness notices an orange Toyota Corolla, the one you've just seen, parked at White Strand car park, and there are 3 male occupants in it. At 10:45 to 11:10 a.m, the man is back out again with his wife walking, and a little time later they notice the orange car again in White Strand car park. These are the same man who originally made the first witness statement, and then he went back out later that morning with his wife. Now, he doesn't recall seeing any occupants in the car the second time when he noticed that the beach car park. It is a 1980 plated Toyota with several stickers on the rear bodywork and windscreen. One reads Italia 90, appropriate for the time, 1991, in reference to the Republic of Ireland's appearance at the World Cup the previous summer. It is a 4-door car with a tow bar. The man's wife scribbles the number plate registration of the car down on a copy of the Kerry Man newspaper she's carrying with her on her walk with her husband. At 10:55 to 11:05 a.m, meanwhile, Brooke Pickard leaves his home in Castlecove. He heads out the door, but briefly returns back because he's forgotten his shopping list and shovel. He places them in his navy blue Ford Transit van. He plans to help his friend John cut bog turf, and in return he'll also bring home some turf later that day. It is the last time his family will ever see Brooke.
Well, I remember him setting out to go and get turf from the bog, and I remember he came back in because he'd forgotten his shopping list and his shovel, and he came back in and then off he went. And as the evening passed, I didn't know where the bog was, and it was before the days of mobile phones. I just knew the bog was somewhere in Waterville.
Now, Brooke and another unidentified man are witnessed at O'Leary's shop in Castlecove village. This is sometime after 11 a.m. in the morning. We believe around 11:15. They're buying £3 worth of petrol using a portable jerry can. That's like a small can that is portable and that you can fill it at a gas pump and then bring it to your car and fill it up. Now, 11:20 to 11:25 a.m. at White Strand Beach car park near Castlecove, a local girl out riding on her pony will later give a detailed account to investigating Gardaí detectives. I believe she was around the age of, I think it was 10 to 12 years of age she was. She stated that as she passed the White Strand car park entrance, she saw Brooke's navy blue van enter the car park with Brooke accompanied by a man in the passenger seat. And that is Brooke Pickard's navy blue Ford Transit van. This will be later recovered. Again, we'll deal with those details when they are relevant in the timeline. Now, Brooke sees this young girl on her pony, and he waved and smiled to her. He recognised her, she recognised him. The van pulled up adjacent to an orange Toyota Corolla parked up facing towards the beach. As she trotted slowly with her pony, she noticed a masked man wearing a balaclava and blue jacket with white stripes. He seemed to be moving at pace, but somewhat hunched over and beckoning to someone behind him, as if not wanting them to be conspicuous. She did not recognise the man as a local, but told detectives that he was quite similar to a sighting she had also seen of a man earlier that morning walking close to the creamery shop in the Castlecove village. The man in the earlier sighting in the village was not wearing a balaclava, but had a similar build and a possible moustache, but she couldn't be absolutely certain it was the same man. At that point, several other masked men appeared, making their way towards Brooke's parked van. The first man stared across at her, the girl on the pony, from a distance of about 30 feet. The girl would later report to Gardaí that she became very unnerved and frightened, quickly turned on her mount and headed away from the car park. Still unnerved, close to home, she told her friends what she had seen. Unfortunately, she's somewhat ridiculed by them for making up stories in a quiet rural village in Kerry. Other local witnesses come forward over the following days, actually corroborating what the young girl had seen, and despite her age, made her statement one of the most significant in this case of Brooke Pickard. By then, it would all be too late. Back to that morning, 11:25 to 11:40 a.m. The White Strand car park in Castlecove is located adjacent to some parts of the N70 road as it winds and moves around, and well below its natural elevation to the coast. Despite a stone perimeter wall at certain sections, the car park is easily visible to passers-by walking or in a car. And in fact, another male witness stated that he did see the distinctive orange Toyota Corolla and recognised Brooke Pickard's navy blue van in the car park around 11:20 a.m. Another man passing by at around 11:30 a.m. had his attention drawn to a gathering of about 5 to 6 men, he wasn't exactly sure, at one end of the car park. Meanwhile, John, Brooke's friend, continues his workday on the bog and later tells Gardaí that he didn't really think anything significant in Brooke not turning up that morning as they had arranged, that he simply got delayed, Brooke got delayed with other work and changed his plans. Back at the home of Brooke Pickard, Penny and the kids were continuing their normal day, and it's not unusual for Brooke to be out all day working from early morning to late evening, so initially there's no real alarm within the family. Now by 6 to 8 p.m, even by this stage, having had the kids long returned from school, cooked a lamb roast dinner, Brooke's wife Penny was not unduly alarmed. She had spent most of the afternoon doing some farm chores and housework, later resting, reading the Bible and praying before the kids, and the bustle of dinner and the evening ensued. In previous weeks, Brooke had had trouble with his transit van and arrived home quite late, having to get it fixed late in the evening. And she thought on that Friday, the 26th of April 1991, he was having trouble again with the van, and the same thing had happened. At 10:30 p.m. through to 1 a.m. into the April the 27th. A beautiful leg of lamb in the oven. Eventually, the oven turned off. Lisa, James, Crowan and Dan, the kids, made their way to bed with Dad still not home. Saturday and no school the next day, but the kids were already excited about their weekend pursuits. Brooke loved his traditional Irish roast and potato dinners. He could at least reheat it when he got home after a long day. With the kids in bed, the old farmhouse quiet, nearly 1 a.m, Penny was now beginning to become seriously concerned. He'd be in any moment now with tales of his day and all the delays and mishaps. But Brooke didn't come home. We're on now to Saturday, April the 27th, 1991. Day after disappearance. Anyone in their late 30s, maybe 40s, can imagine an ordinary Irish household in 1991 with 4 kids from ages 5 to 14. The farmhouse itself hadn't had full electricity up and going for 18 months after when Penny and her husband Brooke moved in 1986. This wasn't a family that lounged around the TV all day. The older kids had their chores before their weekend fun activities, but Dad still wasn't home. Penny could at least preoccupy them with that. At 7 a.m. that morning, April the 27th, she awoke her eldest, Lisa, and in confidence asked her not to alarm the other kids. Born like her dad in Yorkshire, she knew, like her mum, something was seriously wrong. Lisa immediately said to her mother, "Ring John," their neighbour and friend. He had meant to be spending the previous day cutting the bog with him. They called him, and John, surprised as them, said that Brooke had never turned up the previous morning, and he too thought it odd, and perhaps he had van trouble. It was a time for family confidences. Penny confided with Lisa that Brooke had previously went away to England, only leaving a note and they would be back soon. The pair sat with the phone and called Brooke's family and friends in England, anyone who might know where he was. Arriving at a dead end, she began asking neighbours if they had seen or heard from Brooke over the past day. Word spread quickly in Castlecove, as you can imagine, a rural village, that Brooke was missing, and Penny was everywhere asking and looking for his whereabouts. It was now the late afternoon of Saturday, April the 27th, 1991. By chance, Penny spoke to the father of the young girl who had seemingly witnessed his abduction from the White Strand car park the previous morning. Penny was startled and in shock at this account from the father. The family, on behalf of Penny, contacted Sergeant Michael Griffin at Carsveen Garda Station.
Beginning of the day for me was a normal school day. Get up, get ready for school, do all the chores, set off to school. I remember coming home in the evening and he wasn't back. That wasn't altogether odd. He could have been out, doing any number of jobs on the farm. But I remember at dinner time he wasn't there, and that started to be odd. And when he wasn't there the next morning, that wasn't usual.
6 p.m. Sergeant Griffin and Garda Dan Coughlin travelled to Brooke and Penny's farmhouse, working late into the following morning and having interviewed more than a dozen people, they are now beginning to construct a disturbing case of Brooke's last movements. They interviewed John, the friend and neighbour. He confirms that Brooke had arranged to meet him with the van and trailer to cut the bog near Waterville at 11 a.m. That arrangement concerned work Brooke had done earlier that week to transport a calf from John to a woman in Kelmare, Kerry. He would also take some turf from the day's work, and they agreed on the deal. Just as an offside, I've always been somewhat puzzled with that, about the mention of a trailer, and I could understand it, the trailer for the bog turf. Who was picking it up? I don't know the full details. Did Brooke have a trailer? Did he take it with him? Certainly the van, when it was eventually recovered, didn't have a trailer with it, and I do wonder if Brooke had planned when he came back from Castlecove maybe to pick up the trailer and then he was going straight to John. But that's just a proviso to park and think about. Early reports by Gardaí describe Brooke as aged 43 in blue overalls and brown leather working boots, and that he had recently shaved off a beard and sometimes wore his hair in a ponytail and drove a diesel, blue or navy Ford Transit with a registration YNP231W. The retrospective timeline grew better. A new detail. Another neighbour, Brian. Brian established to Gardaí that just before Brooke entered Castlecove village, he had very briefly stopped at Brian's house shortly before 11 a.m. and gave him the telephone number of a farmer who had livestock to sell. Brooke was alone and in good form at that point. Critically, John, his friend, had also told detectives, while imminently waiting for Brooke to arrive at the bog at the far side of the village, Castlecove, he could even see Brooke's van leaving Brian's house in the distance, and that he had grabbed his keys and headed off expecting to meet Brooke within minutes. As he himself entered the village of Castlecove, he was beckoned by a man and asked to help him with petrol for his car, which was at the White Strand car park. John stated that he was too busy and had to meet someone, of course Brooke, and couldn't help. Ironic that it would seem that that man actually stopped Brooke's friend first. So in short, what was becoming clear was that sometime prior to Friday the 26th, 1991, there were people in the immediate area of Castlecove monitoring the movements of Charles Brooke Pickard, his friends, and there was clearly a ploy to use a broken down Toyota Corolla needing fuel to lure Brooke to the White Strand Beach, where a number of other men, partly disguised, intended to abduct and do him serious harm for whatever reasons. Now, before the following discoveries unfolded, Gardaí clearly wanted to identify the man using the orange Toyota Corolla. John hadn't entertained the man looking for fuel in Castlecove, but Brooke did stop. The question was, did Brooke recognise this man, and that is why he stopped. Now, the following day, we're into Sunday morning, April the 28th, 1991. Gardaí and Cahersiveen have gathered enough eyewitness statements to establish that they are dealing with a serious and worryingly armed abduction and potential murder. They have enough local tip-offs with confidential information to request the assistance of the PSNI in Northern Ireland about vehicle and potential suspect movements across several counties. Their critical goal is to search and locate Brooke as quickly as possible. A major search is already underway to track Brooke, his van, and that orange Toyota Corolla. Local and national ground crews are drafted in using an army helicopter along the coast and inland areas. A national media alert is issued containing very particular details. 43 years old, male, slim build, short, cropped grey-brown hair, grey-brown facial stubble, a distinctive nose, wire-rimmed glasses, square jawbone, a Yorkshire accent, and approachable manner. They have more details that are not made public at the time, and that was knowledge of the contents of his navy blue Ford Transit van, his shovel, his lunch, even the brand of his rolled cigarettes he smokes are not immediately disclosed. This is deliberate. In a serious criminal investigation, detectives will often hold back small but critical details that may later assist in verifying later discovered evidence and witness statements. Initial searches throughout late April turn up no sign of Brooke, but the Castlecove and surrounding areas are bubbling with rumours and whispers. Some of these literally emerge as "a guy in the pub told me," and "a guy told me after Sunday Mass that he saw Brooke on the road with a gun and forced into a van." A great deal of this information gets to Gardaí, but was filtered through secondary and third sources. There is clearly an element of fear in the local community about specific details being linked back to them and redistribution by people not from this area. Now, late April, we're on to, we believe, around the 29th, 1991. One of the strongest lines of evidence inquiry was always the orange Toyota Corolla. Now, within 72 hours, it is located in the grounds of Limerick Regional Hospital. We'll show you the map so you can see some of these areas. At the time, 1991, that is 180 kilometres away and well over a 3-hour drive. The car does not reveal any significant evidence of an incident, let alone murder. Indeed, forensic and basic mechanic examinations are of a car with few clues. Beyond being in poor condition and mechanical state, it is clear this was not a vehicle where anything sordid took place. Rather, abandoned as far away as possible, having served its immediate purpose as some form of dupe. Now, days before Charles Brooke Pickard's disappearance, the orange Toyota Corolla had been moved from County Kilkenny and placed into position in Castlecove village. Understandably, Gardaí have never revealed the original owner of the vehicle and the people connected with its later movement, but they knew who they were. A major breakthrough. Thursday, May the 16th, 1991. Brooke Pickard's Navy Ford Transit is located 3 weeks after his abduction. The Gardaí detectives are understandably frustrated that they found that Toyota within days, but it took this long to find the vehicle they believe Brooke was actually abducted in. His van is located just over 40 kilometres from his home in Castlecove. At 3:35 p.m, Garda Tom O'Connor is dispatched to a location just outside Shona Loughnane to check an abandoned transit van following an anonymous call to Carsavine Kerry Garda station. Gardaí are confident that the anonymous tip-out was innocent and came from a passer-by rather than someone in any way connected to Brooke's disappearance. Brooke Pickard's van is abandoned at the entrance van and set at alight. The van still had the identifying number plate, YNP231W. Following a forensic examination, a number of items are entered into evidence for further examination. Remnants of exploded ammunition from a revolver or pistol, likely from the intensity of the fire itself. A brown leather boot, orange and yellow bootlaces, the remains of a steel garden fork without its handle, a hacksaw and chainsaw, a shovel, and spanners and pliers. These items were consistent with tools Brooke regularly carried with him in his van. But more ominously, they also find 2 religious medals and some buttons and coins. Now, in May 1991, an extensive search of the Derrien na Jiha forest begins over many days. Detectives were left with the question: was this the final body deposition site Brooke had been taken to? The fire had destroyed any chance of determining if Brooke had died in the back of the van, but for now, that had to be the working theory. Derrien na Jiha forest is an extensive area, some 400 acres. It's huge. You're going to see some pictures of it as well. Detectives also could not rule out that during the abduction on White Strand Beach in Castlecove to Derrien na Jiha, Brooke's body had been dumped elsewhere on the side of the road. More than 20 kilometres of roadside had to be searched and at least 200 metres inwards everywhere. Detectives also considered that the journey would have lasted about 45 to 50 minutes, passing through Carradaniel and the Waterville villages. Again, circumstantial eyewitness accounts emerged, but nothing was certain at this point. For Penny, Brooke's wife, and the 4 children, they'd been living in a surreal world for the past month. Even the discovery of Brooke's van brings no actual answers or closure. And at the time, Penny commented to the media, "It was very scary. We were very much expecting that the Gardaí were going to find Brooke's body imminently. We were also very surprised that it had taken 3 weeks to find the van and it had only been found by chance. It was a very disturbing and sinister feeling when Brooke's van was found." Now, 1990s onwards, while this case was covered at the time, media were alerted to the sensitivities of the case by Gardaí. Now, I've never quite understood what that means. When faced with such responsibilities from Garda PR officers of the times, media are often left wondering, who's more scared of this case? Us for covering it for the public and giving details, or you for investigating it? It is what it is. At the time, Gardaí would only disclose 2 arrests without further charge. Now, we know that those arrests were more to do with the movement of the orange Toyota Corolla and its specific location pre-crime in Kilkenny, and I believe the movement from it from originally Carlow to Kilkenny. The other arrests came from information passed to Gardaí from the PSNI naming a man under their watch who had travelled to Kilkenny and Cork at the time. What the Gardaí were not telling you at the time was that 12 people in total were arrested in various locations in Kilkenny, Kerry, Cork and Waterford as detectives began investigating Brooke Pickard's disappearance. For whatever reasons they had, Gardaí and Appeals were not willing to discuss publicly their knowledge of men with links to criminality and Northern Ireland. For Penny and her 4 children, life went on as best it could, and no charges were ever brought by Gardaí in this murder case on advice from the Irish DPP, the Department of Public Prosecutions. Nobody, no case. Several men under investigation and linked with the gang who abducted Charles Brooke Pickard had long relocated to Northern Ireland. Penny was trapped in a never-ending circle of trying to figure out her family's future and a house never fully renovated, and Brooke's financial assets frozen because there was nobody and his murder had not been proven. It is a situation many families of murdered people experience. Now, in January 1994, Lisa, Brooke and Penny's eldest child is tragically killed in a car accident at 17 years of age. She was laid to rest in the local cemetery in Castlecove. May 1996, a major fire destroys much of the Brooke Pickard farmhouse in Castlecove. No one is injured because Penny actually and her kids were away on a family visit to England and not at the property at the time of the fire. But in a cruel twist, the cause of the fire was concluded to have been the result of poor property maintenance and renovation work never fully completed. It's the final straw for Penny. In August 1996, Penny and her 3 children, James, Crone and Dan, moved permanently to the UK. The farmhouse is not in a livable condition anymore in Kerry, and with 80% of the main farmhouse destroyed, a family journey began by Penny and Brooke in 1983, later marred by murder and tragedy in Ireland. That journey ends. The 2000s onwards, several intensive searches were carried out over this period of time. Some came from local tip-offs and others from wider public appeals. This would include a search following a GSCR, a Garda Serious Crimes Review Unit, in 2016 on a piece of remote forestry land in the McGillicuddy Reeks, another at Collite Forest off the Waterville Ballinashean Road, approximately 20 kilometres from Waterville, County Kerry. Now, in this timeline, we will leave the last words to Penny. It's a place with very happy memories for me. The local people are so supportive. They were so supportive when I lost my daughter and when our house burnt down. Our friends set up a fund to pay for Lisa's funeral, and people gave so generously. It was so amazing how kind and supportive people were. Later, local people even organised a charity race to raise money for a headstone for Lisa when our family finances were still frozen. The support of the local community following the house fire was just wonderful, and has left such a deep sense of gratitude for people's kindness. I didn't leave Ireland by choice. It was just that my parents urgently needed looking after in England. Castlecove and County Kerry are very happy places for me, despite the difficult things that happened there. We need closure. Brooke's disappearance has impacted upon my sons in so many ways. The first priority in terms of closure will be finding Brooke's body. If he has been murdered and secretly buried, it would bring a form of closure for the boys and myself, and also for his brother and sister. If Brooke was found and laid to rest, that first priority is to find Brooke. The second aspect of closure would be to find out what happened and why. And the third aspect of getting closure will be for those responsible to come clean with what they have done, so that it all can be laid to rest. It has been very hard for my boys to accept the injustice of it all. There have been massive knock-on effects caused to the entire family by what happened to Brooke. My boys have had to live for over 20 years without a dad, and the people responsible are still keeping their secrets. It's a tough thing. It must affect one world's view. It must lend a view of the world that things are not fair, whereas I believe that ultimately things are just. I believe that God is a God of justice. The people responsible, in a sense, that is God's business. He hasn't finished yet. There is a principle in the scriptures that whatever evil is done against us, if we're trusting in God and if we are doing everything we can to live this way, that He will return that evil to the good even in His life. That's one of the reasons I have always had a real sense of underlying peace. Obviously, I've still got the sadness of Brooke not being here to see his children grow up and to see his grandchildren, but the foundation of my belief is that there will be a purpose. That will be something that comes out of this that will be beneficial. One thing that I have experienced in the last 20 years is the peace, strength and hope that comes when you trust in God. Conclusions and analysis, and Brian, do you want to come in there now? Brian?
Right, Mick. I think, yeah, that's powerful stuff, the extract that you had there, Mick, from his wife Penny. I mean, I don't know,
isn't it always the way when we get to this stage where where long-term cases, all the people are looking at. We've looked at it with Deirdre recently. We've looked at it with the two Fionas, Fiona Pender, Fiona Sin. It's like, just give us the body back, and that's it.
And I think the thing to bear in mind as well, like this is the other thing, the other possibility there, Mick, as well, is like these guys were, whoever did this, they were pros, like. So there's no, from the sound of it, if the working theory is correct, like, so it's like there mightn't be a body either. That's the other thing to bear in mind, like that. You know, they might have made sure that he wasn't going to be found, like, so there mightn't actually be a body either. I mean, I hope there is, that there's remains can be recovered, but you know, just got to bear in mind that's a possibility as well. Sadly, you know, that's very difficult looking at. You know, that nice picture of the couple together. They were obviously mad about each other, and then that statement she's made there. I mean, and the daughter getting killed in the accident as well. I mean, Lisa, yeah. I mean, these people have been through hell, like, you know. It's very, it's awful. So look, I just got onto the timeline. I know I gotta get onto the timeline bit there, but I think this was very blatant from the sound of it there. So these guys had no fear of anything. I think they just, and expected to just do what they wanted to do there. Like, so I think also I think the girl on the horse was very lucky. I mean, this is she probably rode that horse through there,
every morning with a regular.
Exactly.
She did it, yeah.
And this was a normal day for her. It was a normal day for Brooke Pickard, and that was probably they probably saw each other and saluted each other on a regular basis there, like. So this would have been a very shock for her. She was a young girl as well. So the dad was talking to his wife after. So all very disturbing stuff. The funny thing about the car, I remember those old Corollas, and they weren't the most sturdy looking. But the weird thing with them, they were I was obsessed with cars when I was a kid. I used to know.
So was I, yeah. So
and but the one thing that I always thought was strange with those Corollas was that the fuel tank and the exhaust pipe were on the same side.
Yeah. Which is slightly unusual because they normally revert them. Yeah,
they put them on opposite sides because obviously if there was anything, if anything went wrong, like with the hot exhaust,
you don't want a burning hot exhaust running below your fuel tank.
Yeah, so I don't know if there was some jiggery pokery going on underneath where the exhaust pipe was redirected around it or what. I never thought about looking under one, but I just always thought it was strange. It was the only car model that I ever saw where the fuel tank and the exhaust were on the same side, like, and I always thought that was weird when I was a kid, like. But anyway, that's beside the point. I think good point there, Mick, what you said about more vehicles being involved. I think that's definite possibility.
That has to be. How did those, whatever about the reason why the orange Toyota Corolla was dumped in Limerick Regional Hospital or the outskirts of Limerick Regional Hospital, somebody had to get those men.
Yeah.
And there must have been, whether it was all 4 or 5, possible in a van. Certainly, I don't think that's practical in a Toyota Corolla. If the Toyota Corolla follow them, somebody had to extract those men from that operation out of there in the middle of Shrona, Loughnane.
Yeah,
they had to get them out of there, and they certainly didn't walk, for fuck's sake. Exactly. They were picked up by someone, and I don't think everybody piled into a Toyota Corolla and waltzed off into the sunset.
No, so, I mean, the other thing to bear in mind, there's two things to bear in mind there as well, that, like, there'd be so-called safe houses in various places as well, so they could have been deposited off in places. The other thing that occurred to me with the car as well, Mick, is that, like, I mean, was this another decoy or another ruse as well, perhaps, like that, take the car off to Limerick, dump it there, like, and, because they, again, remember now, they found the car fairly quickly. They didn't find the van for 3 weeks. So, I mean, perhaps that was a decoy to shift things to Limerick, and
and away from the safe houses, closer
and away
to
from
home.
Whatever was, away from the immediate place where he was abducted. So that did occur to me. I don't know if that's it's a possibility, but again, without any evidence or anything, then it's they all just scattered and went to ground straight away, like, so that's it. So I mean, I don't think there's much more to say there really, other than, like, this is it's a very there's an awful lot, like, once you went through the timeline there, it just opens. The whole thing opens
so
up,
many possibilities as to what,
in terms
whether
of
how I kind of often, and I suggest that I'll go into that more in the our post conclusions thought, how, yes, it was planned, but on what basis was all this planned, and how thorough really was the information that this abduction gang actually had. But look, we can deal with that more in the conclusions. Let's maybe move on to the conclusions.
We get on with that there. Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, we're on to our conclusions and analysis. Now, when we look at cases on Radio Espial True Crime, we're often left with many questions, particularly in cases of historical missing person cold cases. Now, while the case of Charles Brooke Pickard began in the initial days as a missing person search, it was soon upgraded to an abduction and murder. In any analysis, we begin by asking the who, how, and the why questions. Now, I don't technically consider the case of Charles Brooke Pickard, despite the fact we're almost getting on for 35 years. I don't consider it a cold case as such. Now, those who, how, why questions. Who murdered Brooke? Where no actual arrests have led to charges and later convictions, the timeline of facts we have laid out above clearly point to an investigation in the initial weeks and months that appeared to be making progress, based heavily on multiple eyewitness accounts and critically the recovery of the 2 vehicles involved in the abduction and murder, and possibly one other, we don't know. And that also includes items forensically seized and analysed by Gardaí at the time. Despite the lack of a body, after many thorough searches granted in vast rural and remote areas, the investigation never fluidly moved from the who to the how and why. That should not be mistaken for believing the Garda investigation does not know the who. They do. I remind you that there were 12 arrests in this case. Their biggest stumbling block was linking the who and the how, working with the PSNI cross-border, convincing them as well as the Irish DPP, the Department of Public Prosecutions, that they had a valid case to at least charge 2 to 4 men directly connected. From court and legal document exchanges, Radio Espial is aware of the identity of at least 2 of those men. We cannot disclose full identities, but we will refer to them as suspects P and M, operating in a wider network south to north in Ireland, with criminal and former provisional connections to the so-called Irish Troubles. Now please remember that the Good Friday Agreement and better cross-border data sharing did not fully take hold until the 98 agreement came into effect, and that really did come fully into effect until 1999. The Gardaí came up against significant difficulties of further suspect interviews, arrests and potential charges. Several suspects had either come from the north of Ireland as part of the abduction and murder and quickly fled back. Key suspect players involved in Carlow, Kilkenny and Cork ensured during the operational planning that they would always be considered secondary to the murder itself, particularly with no body found. Remember I talked about that idea of did the Toyota Corolla and the van travel together north out of Castlecove, or did that group of men split up? How was Brooke murdered? Oddly, this is the far easier part of the abduction and murder. Prior to April 26th, 1991, an orange Toyota Corolla was stolen from its origin in the east of the country. Gardaí know who originally owned the car, its location prior to being moved from Carlow, Kilkenny and eventually to Kerry, and movements into the Castlecove area at least one day before the abduction and murder. The plan appeared to be to use the orange Toyota Corolla as a dupe to lure Brooke Pickard to White Strand Beach. By then, a number of men, 4, had travelled from the north, likely also the previous day or during the early hours of April the 26th, 1991. They were joined by at least 2 other men from the Kerry locale, one likely the driver who placed the car in Castlecove, later moved to the White Strand car park, asked for Brooke's assistance and travelled with him in Brooke's van to the Strand car park, ironically also asking John, his friend, could he help out? I've always thought that interesting how much identified was Brooke in this. What remains unclear is how between 5 and 6 men, armed and partially disguised, got to the White Strand Beach that morning. Most eyewitnesses don't recall any other cars, so we were left with the question as to how these men were in situ waiting for Brooke for the abduction at the car park. It is quite possible they were dropped off at the White Strand Beach that morning in another vehicle which exited the area, and some location, the body deposition site possibly, agreed, was the rendezvous point to take the men then on, after dumping the van and burning it out, back north over the border. In essence, this abduction and murder, despite the use of Brooke's own van, where it was later found burnt out in May 1991, at Trona Loch Lane Forest must have required at least a third vehicle, quite possibly another van. Now those vehicles, the two at least we know of. One major puzzle in this abduction murder is the abandonment of the orange Toyota Corolla. Why was it driven so far away from the Castlecove area and all the way to the Limerick Regional Hospital? This was an old, unreliable car in poor condition. The van was burnt out only 40 kilometres from Castlecove in Trona Loch Lane Forest. Understandably, it contained significant evidence. Did the Corolla travel with the van to the likely deposition site? Or did the gang of 5 to 6 men split after the abduction in Castlecove? Why wasn't the orange Toyota Corolla burnt out like the van when abandoned at Limerick Regional Hospital? Why there, in such a busy city? Is it possible during the confrontation and abduction one of the gang was injured as Charles Brooke Pickard fought back? There appears no blood evidence from the Corolla or forensic link to the murder deposition site itself. Perhaps the early confrontation in the car park at the Strand and in the back of the van. I do not believe the Toyota Corolla ever followed the transit van with the abductors and murderers, the Trona Loch Lane deposition site. Rather, the gang soon split up, exiting Castlecove, 2 or 3 men in either vehicles with their own agreed operational plan that morning and afternoon. The men in the van with Brooke had their own rendezvous and exit plan once Brooke was dealt with. But the movement of the Corolla to Limerick remains odd, and perhaps part of a local criminal element from Limerick with connections to the Castlecove area. In essence, local criminals looked after the bring Brooke to us, and the gang from the north of Ireland were thoroughly adept at the you leave the rest of the part to us. Why was Brooke murdered? This remains the biggest puzzle in the case. Once again, the Garda long concluded that Brooke had no links to provisional or gangland criminality. Now, for unknown reasons, local community criminals in the Castle Daniel area of Kerry tipped off INLA contacts in the north of Ireland that Brooke Pickard had some kind of involvement in a drug smuggling run, and that he was likely holding a large sum of money as a result of a drug shipment to the area from the north in March 1991. Now, this is important. Ultimately, Gardaí discovered that these rumours were completely bogus, but they may well have inspired several men from the north with connections to provisional forces and drug gangs to instigate an operation south using key community connections in Kerry, Kilkenny and Limerick. And we cannot discount the reality that criminal and provisional elements were given bogus information based on those rumours and nothing more. It has left Gardaí investigators with other possibilities: debt, money, land dispute, or some deep-rooted hatred. The latter two didn't make sense. Brooke and Penny owned their own farmhouse in Behaghan. There was also speculation that perhaps Brooke was the victim of robbery, that he may have been carrying a large sum of cash on the day in question. But again, there's no evidence of that, no cash withdrawals from his account, and Brooke's main plan that day was cutting the bog with his friend John and taking home a supply of turf as his return from work there. Not exactly the grounds for a major criminal provisional hand-holding operation. So we are left asking, was this over some unpaid debt or grievance locally which spiraled out of control with someone having dangerous connections? The planning, extreme execution of abduction and murder does not lend itself well to simple opportunism. And it would be a double and cruel tragedy if the murder of Brooke Pickard amounted to nothing more than an English guy in Kerry and nothing more than completely unfounded rumours prior to his murder. We are left with a money debt, or there are details of this case and Brooke's previous interactions and relationships we are not aware of that led to this. Brian, as we move to the end of this timeline, we'll move to our final thoughts and discussions before we wrap up.
There was one other thing there, Mick.
Yeah.
I just wanted to address here as well. I think, we mentioned earlier on in the timeline there about, you know, the no charges were ever brought by Gardaí in the murder case on advice from the Irish DPP.
Yeah.
Now, that's again standard stuff. Like, presumably there wasn't enough evidence, so then they're not going to go ahead.
Yeah.
But I mean, was there any indications on how extensive was the file that they sent in, and did it name any names? Was there any evidence at all, or was there some evidence or circumstantial evidence, or could you expand a bit on that, or is it just was it just a straight black and white there? No, for the DPP.
We mentioned suspects P and suspect M. I really, at this point in time, I have very briefly flicked through the court document online. I do not really want to, obviously, understand me, and I said it, mention names. So there are extensive references to the case of Brooke in it, and that's really as far as I think we can go legally on Radio Espial. But in essence, as you say, the DPP ruled there was not sufficient evidence to really go after the two suspects primary, who were, I think one was located south, one was located soon moved north, and there were additional men who were never named. I'm not even aware of those names, so that's about as far as I think Radio Espial can go. So in essence, to answer your question, no, despite the argument that there should have been more evidence, no, essentially the DPP wasn't convinced there was anywhere near enough evidence, and that probably is down to forensic evidence.
That was kind of leads on to the next thing I wanted to look at, as well as I suppose the car and the remains of the van. Like, were they preserved since? Because I suppose surely, you know, forensics, DNA, etc., would have advanced considerably since then, because we're 1991. I mean, the first DNA solved case was, I think, was 1986, 87 with the Colin Pitchfork case, and then later you had the Ian Sims was convicted of murdering Helen McCourt without a body. That was 1988. So, you know, there was DNA used in solving cases there, but I think forensics and all that should have come on considerably. So I suppose, do you know if the vehicles were preserved or not?
Forensics would have been gathered, but remember, everybody, you know, this is 1991. So there was a little bit more awareness of DNA. Remember, the van was burnt out. The Toyota Corolla wasn't, which I always thought, and I said I thought that was a bit bizarre. Why? But as you rightly said, maybe that was a decoy. Maybe they cleaned it up. Nothing ever happened in that Toyota Corolla that they felt once cleaned of prints and that kind of thing. So they thought, well, you know, and if we burn that out and then they find the van up a lane in Strona Loughnane, they're going to link the two, and then we're screwed, because then they'll start, you know, linking the two. Well, ultimately they did, but, you know, it brings, so, okay, maybe
the time lag works in their favour. It's the lag in time, it works in their favour, not against them.
It works in their favour. Now, the question you asked, whether I can't talk specifics on this case, but my understanding, particularly long term, again, 34 years ago, we're almost getting on 35 years ago. Do those cars exist? No. They don't exist. Once the forensic is extracted from them, they may be held for a period of time, even a period of years, but no, those vehicles are not don't exist now. It's not like we go, oh, hang on, maybe we can go back and check this or check that. No, it's what was extracted at the time. Those vehicles don't exist now.
Right. I suppose then beyond that, then I mean, I think whatever triggered this, or whatever belief was held about him to trigger this, I mean, it has to be something major anyway, I think, because it was a well-planned, orchestrated maneuver the working theory suggests it was a cross-border team of people, but I don't think such an operation would have been implemented for simple thing as bias on his nationality or anything. I think.
Yeah, no, I don't think that with that, but I did suggest
said something about him or that triggered this, like you know. So so I think this was a big operation. As I said, it was well planned and well orchestrated. By orchestrated, I mean implemented. Like it was implemented specifically, you know, as well, you know.
But as I suggested, was it based on some form of grudge?
Yeah.
And you never know what a grudge can be based on. Or was it based on, as I also suggested in the timeline, on the conclusions, some form of misinformation. Bogus information that people assumed Brooke had been involved in other you know, there was talk about drugs, all sorts of drugs, which was completely unfounded. Was that believed by this gang, that somehow he was in their patch or in one of their lads' patch, and we're going to sort him out, and what are you doing there? You know, so again, was it bogus information that was fed to a northern gang who came out and said, we'll sort him out for you, don't you be worrying, you know? I don't know. We don't know. The Gardaí have never revealed their full hand in what they know, but from those brief court documents that I showed, it suggests that there's something more underlying in this case that we publicly are not aware of, and it could not be referenced within the case because obviously
but it went beyond the locality because if it was local.
These people were from various. We mentioned, you know, the movement of the Toyota Corolla, Carlow, Kilkenny, down then into Kerry, cross-border movement of men into that area from Kerry, with associations with people from the areas of Kerry, and the you know, so there's an awful lot of elements and complexity and associations going on here, which is why I suggested, was this some kind of bogus information that was communicated to the wrong people, and the wrong people, or rather the right, depending on your grievance, reacted, but it was based on bogus information. But still tragic. Whether it was or wasn't bogus information, no one deserves to be taken into a forest and done away with in this manner, with 4 kids and a wife.
I know, very, very, very tragic, very sad for the family and all the people who, I mean, you know, it was. I hope they get recover his remains at least anyway.
And it's a case that's popped up once or twice. You know, there was an awful lot of interest in the case around 2011. Some of our interviews with the family came from then, and then again around 2016 with the Garda review and further searches. But really, in the last 9 years, we're back to a cold case again. That really has nothing has surfaced it, and it's one of the reasons when I looked at this case, because I always say to people, we're a bit circumspect when we get into gang related stuff, provisional northern stuff, but I felt we could make one exception for this, because ultimately I don't believe if we ever find out the reasons it has anything actually to do with any of that stuff. I think this was a man, whether correct information or bogus information, was caught in the middle of something he was probably completely unaware of.
Very, very sad. Rest in peace, Senor. Charles Brooke Pickard, and I hope they recover his remains for the family anyway.
Well, we hope. Obviously, as we say, this was a complex case. Thank you for joining us this week, Brian and myself, on Radio Espial. As we always say, these intense timelines, they take many weeks planning and production, and this has been tiring, particularly for me, because I've been working on this for the last 3 or 4 weeks. They're intense, and for now I don't have a date of our next timeline upload and release, likely later in the month of November. We will be back either next week, don't hold us to that, with either a mini feature or a Radio Spoil insider. So either next week or the following week. Until then, God bless from myself and Brian.
All the best,
Take care.
folks. Bye now.